Hello and welcome to lesson 13 of BHL 1, this time discussing the book of Leviticus. That's our goal for this presentation, to study the background of Leviticus, and then to answer this question: why study Leviticus today? First piece of background: why do we call this Leviticus in the first place? That's the Latin and the Greek name for this book, Leviticus. It means pertaining to the Levites, because this book is all about the Levites and the various practices that they take part in. Interestingly, the Hebrew name is not Leviticus. This word is Vayikra. That's how you'd say it. It's the first line of the book. And he called. With these Hebrew book names, most often they simply take the first word, and that's what the name of the book becomes. So the first word of Leviticus in Hebrew, Vayikra, and he called. So that's why we give it that name. The author of this book is Moses. We've previously discussed the Pentateuch. Jesus gives authorship to Moses, so we will also give authorship to Moses. We've got a precise date for this book, 1446, thanks to some dating that comes during Kings and the reign of Solomon, counting back from the dedication of the temple. This is during that first month at Mount Sinai, after the people have exodused out of Egypt, and now they're preparing to go to the Holy Land, to the Promised Land, and they're gathered around Mount Sinai. God is giving them various laws, rules, things to live by. Really, the purpose of this book is to give instructions for worship and for holy living. It wasn't just for the Levites, though the Levites are most often taking part in these ceremonies, but it's for all of Israel. The book of Leviticus contains a few key concepts. First concept that we'll discuss is holiness. No, we're not talking about this sort of holiness. If this is you, please let me know. But we're discussing God's holiness. Holiness, we know from catechism class, is to be set apart. To be holy is to be set apart. We have been made holy through Christ. He has set us apart from the world of sin and instead made us his children. Well, Israel, they too were supposed to be set apart from the Gentile nations that surrounded them. That holiness wasn't just for the people, though. It was also for the land that they were about to inherit. Another key concept is sacrifice, specifically a substitutionary sacrifice in that account of Leviticus 16, the Day of Atonement. There's many sacrifices. We'll get to that throughout the book of Leviticus, particularly the scapegoat as a type of Christ is what we want to focus on. That scapegoat would be sent off to die with the people's sins. Their sins would die with that scapegoat. Sort of reminds me of Caiaphas in the book of John. He told the other religious leaders who wanted to kill Jesus, "You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." I think about that with the scapegoat, one life dying for the people. We also have the concept of Sabbath. We've covered this. We've previously seen this word covered in Exodus. In the Ten Commandments, we are commanded to take a Sabbath rest. It's a really huge word in the Old Testament, particularly in the book of Leviticus. Maybe we've sort of lost this concept in modern times, this idea of taking a rest. But it's really big for the Israelites. We see how that the Lord was giving them rest from their wandering, rest from their exodus. We too seek rest in God. We find that rest in the pages of Scripture. Here's a little two-part outline, or at least an outline that we're going to use for the book of Leviticus. The first chunk of Leviticus, chapters 1 through 10, it focuses on approaching God. The first 7 chapters of that section, sacrifices to God, being set apart, being holy before God. And then the next few, the priesthood of Aaron, the people who served as go-betweens between a sinful people and a holy God. The next chunk of Leviticus deals with living with God. How does a nation function with God as their king? We have a large description of the Day of Atonement, one of the most major festivals in the Israelite calendar year. Here, sins are atoned for through different sacrifices. At the end of the book, we also have some festivals described. We're not going to spend much time covering this, but they are really interesting. It really gets you into what it looked like to be an Israelite, what their importance was, their biggest days of the year. Let's take a look at some of those specific sacrifices discussed in those first 7 chapters. We didn't read them for today, but here's a little overview to get this in your mind, all these different types of sacrifices. First of all, we have this burnt offering sacrifice. In chapter 1, you can provide a bull, a ram, a male bird, and it was a voluntary act of worship. This was something that you did to show your trust in God. Second kind of sacrifice was a grain sacrifice. Some grain, some flour, baked bread, along with a burnt offering, and also sometimes with the fellowship offering, which we're going to get to. But it's also voluntary. The specific reason that you're going to be giving this is to recognize God's goodness. God has provided for me in my life, therefore I give a sacrifice willingly, freely. The third sort of offering described is a fellowship offering. It had a little higher standard for the sacrifice given. It had to be a perfect animal, something that was without blame, without defect. That's really supposed to be for all of the sacrifices. This one you can also offer up bread. Again, this one is voluntary, but the neat part about this sacrifice, the burnt offering, it's completely burned up before God. A grain offering would go to the priests, at least a portion would, and then the fellowship offering, this is a communal meal. You're going to get to partake in this as well. Also voluntary. The fourth and the fifth one, these are going to be mandatory sacrifices. The fourth one is sin offering. You're going to, if you are in higher social status, if you make more money, you're going to offer something more valuable. And if you're on the lower end of the political or the social spectrum, you're going to be giving something that's not quite as valuable, keeping in line with your income ability. So if you're a priest, you're going to be offering a bull. And if you're really poor, you're going to be offering some flour. This is a mandatory sacrifice made for unintentional sins. Similar, the guilt offering, you'll be providing a ram or a lamb. This is another larger offering. This one's sort of interesting, almost feels like a subcategory in our mind. But this is an unintentional sin that required restitution. So if someone was injured or in some way you had done something accidentally that caused harm to someone or something else, this would be the sort of sacrifice you would offer for that. Let's talk big issues of Leviticus. Why study this book in the first place? We are New Testament Christians. These laws no longer apply to us. It seems like, well, this is really just laws for the Jews living before Jesus, not directly applicable. So think about that question. Why are we spending time in a very busy semester studying this book? Pray about that. We'll discuss and answer that question during class.